Okay, so I went to record this earlier today and I didn't get a chance, so while I'm walking I thought I might as well do it now. So I was going to do a post for you guys about past life memories because it popped up where I'd put the pictures up of Egypt, and I just looking at them, I was looking at like the Stonehenge and thinking, because I keep looking at the stones in England and thinking they're very weathered because of our weather. I feel as though they would have looked like those ones in the Kem temple, which is meant to be ancient. Kem would have been a late Atlantean, what do they call it, colony of Atlantis, which run all the way through Europe. You can see it all through, like in Malta and other places, all within the Mediterranean and without. But my gut has been saying, I think there's, when you listen to Ashla Nadine, she talks about the true site being hidden for a reason, because there were certain things. I feel like here there is stuff, and I feel like stones were moved. I can't find it though, I'm rambling now, but I found this documentary ages ago, and they were talking about how there was watermarks on some of the stones, and it was as if they'd been in water in more of a boggy kind of situation, a bit like the stuff that's kind of in Spain that is now revealed because the water's receded where it's been so hot. These were similar weathering and then been moved, and my gut had said been moved, definitely. I'm not saying the stones at Stonehenge aren't relevant. The blue stone felt relevant to me, and the one that's linked with Orkney and the Orkney stones. But even those, part of me said that they would have been encased in ice. Now I don't know what the documentation says of that, because they can't carbon date. They can only carbon date with underneath. So and I'm digressing, kind of talking about what we were what I was looking at and why I put up that post in the Black Cat Guardian in there, which I might share in there as well. And why? Because it seems relevant. I don't know why it seems relevant. I need to know why. I will ask why, but it just seems more relevant now. And I don't know if any of you know, what's her name, Joanna James, and she was looking at stuff of what they'd been doing in Turkey, which was deliberately buried. That's carbon dated to, it is 10,000 years. So Stonehenge is believed to be 6, this is 10, and it was deliberately buried, and there's so much more under there, because it contradicts the narrative of we started around this area and we were spread out with this. In a sense, there's people that look at the stillers on there and saying, look, that they buried it because they knew there was a asteroid coming. Now, in my memories and past life memories that I've spoken of, we knew energy was shifting, we knew that earthquakes were coming, and we were holding them back energetically because of the technology that we had. It was natural technology, it was working as a collective, and we held it back as long as we could, and then it imploded. So 6 months prior to that, the ships were leaving, and for what Matthias says, he said that like people were leaving anyway because the motherland was becoming like an overbearing mother, insisting we do certain things, we're trying to retain control. It was corrupt from other people. I know their past memories, but when we fit them all together, we kind of piece together this time. When we think of technology, we think of AI, we think of like spaceship type technology. The technology was us. We are still the technology. We are the best technology on this planet at the moment, and still will ever be, because it's a different kind of technology. Doesn't mean that we won't invent stuff that's powerful, but having knowledge of farming, having knowledge of seed cultivation. It's a technology, it's building in itself. So that's, and sound, and how to use sound, how to use it with our brain waves, all of that is responsible. So I wanted to talk about this past life memory, and definitely there's many from there. So perhaps I should start with that one before I go into the one I was going to share. So the first one, because it seems to evolve, it seems to like other fractalization, and since my Akashic reading opened up into a whole different stuff that I hadn't remembered, she said in my reading was being withheld, so it wasn't as positive as I thought. So my initial memory was in shiny polished floors, circular windows, circular skylines, because the skyline was powerful memory when the water came. But I and the other novices would go into the water, and we would sing in the water, and it would vibrate with the vocals of our singing within this like cave structure, which was a temple. It was cave-like, but it had a skyline at the top. And the closest I've seen is the stuff in Sardinia, actually. But in one of the Akashics, she said, I asked about it. She said almost like the temple was lifted. I was in the temple and I was lifted out, and that's how I got out and was taken out to sea. It was like energetically a bubble of protection was around it energetically, and it was almost like it was lifted and placed somewhere else. But in my memory of it, it was the water came up from, not from the top, but from the bottom. So it was rising, and the force of the water coming up below me pushed me and my body up to the skyline. And there was like a great thing there. It wasn't very heavy, but my body, I got knocked out. Probably the best thing that could have happened, because then I was all relaxed where I was unconscious, and my body then went, and if I'd been tensed, I think I wouldn't have gone through the hole, if that makes sense, in the same way. I was battered and bruised. And then the next thing I remember is eruptions happening behind me. I had been washed out to sea, and had been picked up because they'd recognised me and put me in a boat and coughing up water. Because I thought drowned. And then I was always unsure whether it was like I was jumping from one era to the next, one life to the next. Like that's where I died in that life. And then the other life I was seeing one at Pompeii. And that's always kind of confused me. Hence why I asked whether that was the case or whether it was the same. Still didn't get a definitive answer of that. But when I was seeing the eruptions in the boat, I was so sad, because there was an instant knowledge that all of the technology, if you like, all of the knowledge and the wisdom was going with that was going completely. Hang on. Hopefully you can still hear me. My dog is screaming. I am outside. I'm going to walk back. Was going. And so I knew we weren't going back. I knew where we were heading was somewhere not great. So where we were heading was not great, and it would be a long time before we would get to that point again. There was an instant knowledge of that. And there was an understanding of that. We did know that. It was almost like we had put things in place to prepare for that, because we knew there would be a forgetting, we wouldn't remember in the same way. And then that kind of leads me to that other past life memory. I mean, there's more to that one. But yes, so 6 months before, everyone was leaving on the boats. And this memory, I was 16 when it came through, and I would have repeated memories of that death. And then when everyone was going, and the docks, I thought that it was my boyfriend. I was saying goodbye because this young man in front of me, gorgeous young man that I loved, he was leaving me. I didn't want him to leave, but I couldn't see. I just could feel the amount of love I had, and I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to be parted from him, but I knew it was my job to stay with what I thought was my father. There was a deep love towards this man who I saw as a father figure. He was my teacher. He was the leader. And it wasn't 2 years later when Matthias was channeling the guy who taught at the Atlantian school. I knew that he was channeling him. And that was the guy that I looked up to, who I stayed behind. And there's memories of conversations with this guy who I saw as a father figure. He appeared to, in my memory, to the 16-year-old me like a king. He was definitely a person of power. And we, as women, had power, great power. We were taught, we were learning the ropes, if you like, to being a priestess, which I didn't finish. I felt like I finished that in this lifetime. That was part of why I had to go to Egypt in my own soul contract, I feel. But yeah, the conversations with him is that I had to stay. But where I went was not the main city. When I talk about this circle thing with the water, it was an outpost. So I'd gone to somewhere where he felt I would survive because he was a seer. But I had a job to do. So when I talk about we were holding back, we were literally felt like we were holding back a volcanic eruption and the eruptions that were about to happen. We were very aware of it. And everyone was in different places, knowing we would die, but we didn't fear it. And that's a theme. In that life I felt like I had a job to do. And even as a kid, I've got memories of feeling like, well, I've got a job. There's certain things I have to do in this life before I die. There's certain things, I don't know what they are. I know that I'm here for a purpose. And I've had that certainty since, well, I think it's primary school, secondary school. So I would have been since I was 10, 11 years old. Most definitely. Even though around that time I was always getting into boys and waking up with that sort of stuff. It was different. No, it wasn't about changing the world. I just knew there were certain things I had to do, which make more sense now than they did then. So where I was, we were holding and they were holding, and we held it back as long as we could, so as many people could get to where they needed to go to. Because remember I said it was like we were preparing for a time when we would wait for now. So certain information had to be encoded. It was encoded in us, in our energy, but also encoded in, I feel like it was encoded in the different religions. It was almost like we broke up different parts of it. And if you put it all together, you get the big picture. But as it's kind of like Chinese whispers down through the ages, it's been shifted and changed and not quite the way it was. But some of it's still intact, enough that we could piece together the puzzle, that you're looking at a puzzle with missing pieces to start to see the picture when we started to remember, which is the time that we're in now. So the remembering, and that links to this other memory, past life memory, which I'll save for part 2, which is very much about us remembering and waking up to remembering, which I always find really funny, and linked to the young girl that I met in Egypt, who remembers the same past life memory as me from a different perspective, which was a very interesting experience, I have to say. So anything else about that other memory? So I later believed he was my brother, rather than my lover, and that he went on to be a priest, and where he went was Kem, and that was what we now call ancient Egypt. And I feel like the outpost, this is why I feel so strongly linked to here, the outpost was this area. There would have been major ice all around here, but I feel like it wasn't in the same spot that England and Ireland, Scotland are now, that it was slightly further down, and that things have kind of shifted with continental shifts and other stuff, because we're talking thousands and thousands of years, at least 12,500 years, which put me and my memories at the last part of Atlantis's supposed history. I have a friend who is no longer with us, who remembers prior to that, in earlier times. But part of my Akashic, I mean, she talks about these huge crystals, which are very much in my memory. One of my pictures of it, where they were like huge geodes, so they were created naturally, but they were big enough that you could lay in them, and people did that. It's like they were half cut. If you imagine a geode, and you get one half and the other half big enough for people to lay in, and some of them were as tall as buildings. They were huge, and there was much more of them than there are now. A lot of it's been mined or broken up, etc., but this was definitely big. And in here, I'm closing my eyes and trying to remember the picture of it. So a huge crystal, and then there was water and ice. So it was like fire and ice. It reminds me of like Iceland that we have now, in a lot of ways, because there was the raw ruggedness of it, but it was very fertile, but very different. I mean, a lot of people are saying the Sahara, there's evidence that that part was all riverlands, and that when you listen to the Plato script, we're taking modern mapping, and we talk of the Pillar of Hercules, but there were 7 pillars of Hercules back in their time, which could mean that it marks the delta. So it's like the Egyptian delta. You go over from Egypt and across, and there was all these riverways, which is, the geology says, is actually confirmed now. I think that is true. I also think there was land masses to the side that are not there now, but I still feel that here was part of those land islands, that it was all the way down, although this wasn't quite so far up, right down to off the coast of Africa, all the way through and right through the Mediterranean. There are many sites. I do feel like some of those will be uncovered, that perhaps they have been, and people have not been forthcoming because it interferes with the narrative that they feel will interfere with religions and cause problems, because it contradicts some of that. It doesn't need to. They were not perfect, I think, possibly because we've put it up on a pedestal. As I said, there was a lot of corruption. Certain people I know remember that and didn't speak out, hence it's like we signed up to atone, or felt we need to atone and be in service for humanity for that reason. In one of the memories, and I was crying, I see what I take to believe this the whole sphere of this literal explosion through time. So when lots of people are talking about how time was broken, time is responsible in some regards, because when I was holding back that thing, we pushed back, and it's like we set off weapons. It's almost like being the one that pressed the button for the bomb that killed thousands of people. We knew that would be the case, and there was as that was happening, it was bizarre. It's like I was remote viewing the young girl I had originally seen this memory through. She was channeling and connected to other entity beings, energy that then pulled out and disconnected because it had been connected. And once all of this stuff exploded, that divine, it's like a divine telephone, if you like, was no more, and the loss of it was horrendous. It was like that when we were doing that stuff, we were completely connected in a way that's, I can't even describe. It's this, even the channeling powers in comparison to what it felt like, and I felt the disconnect. So you could argue, because that's like to transition through death, a very similar feeling of being in your fullness, being connected and holding that energy through our body, which we were able to do because of practices. That we will get to that point, that we're starting to get to that point, but not everyone will be able to get to that point overnight. And some of us, it'll take 600 years to get there, that the body won't be physically ready because of the shifts. It's shifting now. Between 60 and 600 years is what I keep being told. So humanity, I see this future, and I see the future being the past as well as the present, if that makes it. I know I'm getting a bit, but when it's in that, it's like you're outside of time and space. Yeah, but it was like this huge beam thing, and the pulling away and disconnect, and then come back down and totally obliterated. The stuff was there, so people look for the signs of the capital. There's nothing. It literally imploded. It blew up, imploded on himself. And it also, because it went all the way right to China and Pakistan, there's evidence of that, like nuclear explosive energy is a result of one of the, these are one of the spots. There was one here, one there, one, and different places. And I felt like when I tuned into that memory, I was tapping into my cellular memory of not only that one life that was remembering, but the souls they were telepathically linked to, physically here on Earth and energetically in another realm. So that's why it's hard to kind of describe that life one. The other ones are easier, but this one took a little bit longer. So perhaps it's best that I started with that one. I have spoken about it many times, maybe not so much in the details of the energy stuff. Yeah. So I don't remember her dying. I remember the flood dying, but not getting old. But in that life, just the boat and the realisation that it was far worse, and not wanting to, wishing that I had died because I didn't want to go on in a way. It was more knowing we had to, and that we were responsible for holding information and sharing that and trying to keep it safe so it was not destroyed. So I do feel like there is a relevance to the whole burying with Göbekli. I also feel that stones would have had this totem kind of stone graphics in some of them, but the later colonies like Kem, that straight stone where it's perfect, that what they recreated, which was much later at Stonehenge, was to mimic that, but that it's not at its original site, nor is it connected in the same way if it was at the site that it is now. So this is what's important. They were built, and they were built at different times because they were built because where things were shifted, just like the sky shifted and what they were linking to shifted, the rivers change their flow depending on what's happening. So does the ley lines, and the same thing happening. And what is key is that the people, us, we're the neurons, amplify that. So when we go to a site, that could be in my back garden, that could be in a park, that could be in Disneyland, wherever, and we as a group do energetic work, we create that as a sacred site. And if people keep going to that place, they keep it, it's like it creates a imprint is the word, like an imprint for the flow to go to that point. Does that make sense? It's almost like you're getting bits of string. By being there, you create a point, and then that energy goes off to wherever it would have been diverted for you. It's not that we're diverting it, just that it shifts, and we're finding where it is, like we're following the energy within the earth, like the meridians within our body, which I feel are linked to the galactic gates as well. Keep saying I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to channel that because feel like that's something I've been talking about for a while that needs to come through me. Anyway, so I will leave it with that. And this is part 1. There will be, I don't know how many more parts to speak of. There are other ones. That's one of the strongest ones. That's the first one, as I said, that came through. And I was probably 15, 16. But I had been having recurring dreams of drowning. And I was looking up the symbolic meaning of drowning and it being linked to emotions and dream as well. And all of them were relevant. So this is also important to say, because from what I've learnt with Matthias, it doesn't matter. It's not, oh, that was my life. Everyone remembers being Cleopatra. It was this. It's the frequency that you are most in tune with in that lifetime is the memories that will come to you, the wisdom that will come to you, because it's all a big, think of it like the internet, that you're Google searching when on a tuning fork of who you are. That's what you draw to you with those life memories. And that one's what came through for me. But also that information that is linked to the relevance of what is needed for that soul to integrate at the time. And for me, obviously, it was relationships and boyfriends, hence me seeing this young guy who was my brother. Oh, she loves this guy, and he left her, and she stayed behind because of duty. So all those themes. So psychologically, subconsciously, what was needed and what I needed to know for myself at that point in my life. And each has been a puzzle for this picture, for a purpose. Matthias would say a game, divine game, for soul memories, the explosion of this sphere thing of Menti and holding information, doing certain work. Whether it's me, whether it's someone else, it's all of us. And like I said, within the pool, we would sing. And I wasn't just remembering my memories, because I was telepathically linked at the time to my sisterhood, if you like, the priestess and priests that were working in tandem to hold energy enough for certain information to get to where it needed to, enough to be a tipping point for creation, for humanity to still live. So that was important for Earth too, and that happened. And different places. I do feel that it's linked to Java in some ways. And if I go into the Akashic, it's a bit more dreamlike. It's almost like what she talked about, like I went from one part of the earth, almost like I went through some portal thing to the other side. But I don't know. I don't know about that. I still, because that wasn't my vision. That's what someone else is telling me. So I would rather discern from what comes from my own memory. But she said that was definitely and I think what she was picking up was Mu. And there being because I also think that a lot of what we think of as Atlantis is actually Mu, which is Lemuria, which is the other side. It's like near Java and all around there. It also links with those that have that genetics, and that's why diet for me with channeling is linked. Not for everyone, I think that's really important to say, but for me personally that's linked with my own. And I think with what's happened in some of the spiritual leaders are saying, right, you need to do this, you need to take this drug, you need to, and there's been some stuff about one particular, I'm not going to say the name because in case this gets shared on social, but to remember that actually we are all human. And the really important thing that my guidance is that even if I'm telling information saying this will help you with ascension, it's also saying that will help some, not everyone. We are all different. Every single one of us has to go on our own. There are no gene keys, one size fits all, for example. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. We are all unique, and every single one of us will have our own keys to unlock, and only we can unlock that information. Others can activate us so we can unlock it in the way that they are like a mirror. However, they are only a reminder of who we truly are in our sovereign self, if they're standing in their own sovereignty. We are the ones that remember, we are the ones that discern. So hopefully that you'll find interesting, that you can find helpful. I'm not even sure why it's to share it. It feels relevant at the moment, possibly because there's so much similarities. Matthias has spoken of like this time is an exact mirror of the astrology, because when we had the North Star here, it's now down there. So we're mirroring what was happening in our society. This falling away of structures not working, of trying to live a certain way that we've been living for a while and it just not happening. So forcing it to try and make people stay doing things a certain way doesn't work. The way things we have to evolve and shift. That's why I'm saying these different, that's part of the knowledge, was that is key. That our political systems need to evolve too. That doesn't mean you just go and fight and burn everything down. It means we start from the inside out, and that's already happening. People are moving into places to shift consciousness in the way they speak, even if they come across as being not necessarily what is expected, not what the mass are collectively in fear with. There are people that have the power in their way of speaking, articulating, to dampen the fires of fear, hang on, this is coming through as channeled. Dampen the fires of fear, shift sight to open eyes into brighten within light, to see shadow, through their own candlelight. So what I mean by that, to see shadow through your own candlelight, to see that you, as a light, when you're in alignment with your light and your shadow, you don't fear your own shadow. You see it as, in fact, you seek it out within yourself to evolve, to shift, to understand, to learn, to counterpoint, to balance, to understand and clarify, and to grow. And then I've got all that. Okay, I'm trying to keep with specific. But there are many. There are many of us. I'm not just saying it's me. It's like there are thousands and thousands of people saying the same thing, that are feeling the same words, that are feeling the same information downloading through them, that they're feeling the need to share, because others, when we share it, whether it's a counterpoint and it's a contrast to what their beliefs are, that contrast within them creates discernment, to understand, to learn, to seek, to then for the emotions to teach. When we're off balance, we seek to find the balance. I'm going to leave it at that. So, yeah, as I've said, part 1. Love and blessings, and thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments, do you have similar memories of this time? What are they? How do they benefit you? Please share.